Jean-Paul Sartre's idea of responsibility is one of the most demanding claims in modern philosophy. It is also one of the most frequently misunderstood. Sartre does not argue that human beings are responsible for everything in a causal sense. He does not claim that individuals control all outcomes, events, or histories. What he claims is more severe: human beings are responsible for the meaning of what they do, and that responsibility has no natural stopping point. Responsibility for Sartre does not end where intention ends. It does not stop at motive, role, obedience, or circumstance. It extends as far as action extends, and action, Sartre insists, always exceeds what one intends. This claim follows directly from Sartre's understanding of freedom. If consciousness is not a thing, if it is defined by negation and projection, then every action is a choice of meaning. One does not merely cause effects. One affirms a way of being in the world. One declares implicitly, this is acceptable, this is justified, or this is how one may act. Responsibility attaches to that declaration. This is why Sartre insists that good intentions do not absolve responsibility. Intentions matter, but they do not exhaust meaning. An action that produces harm does not lose its moral weight because it was well meant. To claim innocence on the basis of intention is to confuse explanation with justification. Sartre believes this confusion is widespread because it offers comfort. If responsibility ends with intention, then one need not answer for consequences one did not foresee or desire. Sartre denies this refuge. He does not deny that outcomes may exceed intention. He insists that they still belong to the action. To act is to intervene in a world one does not control. One cannot claim credit for intervention while disowning its effects. This does not mean Sartre treats all consequences as equally blameworthy. He is not distributing guilt mechanically. He is describing a structure. Action commits the actor beyond what they meant to do. This commitment becomes clearer when we consider roles. People often believe that roles limit responsibility. I was just doing my job. I was following instructions. I was acting in my official capacity. Sartre rejects these appeals entirely. A role does not act. A person acts through a role. To accept a role is to choose how that role will be lived. One chooses how strictly to follow orders, how creatively to interpret them, when to resist and when to comply. These choices may be constrained, dangerous, or costly, but they remain choices. Sartre insists that obedience is never automatic. It is a decision made under pressure. To deny this is to turn oneself into a thing. This is why Sartre speaks of responsibility as unlimited. It is not that one is responsible for everything that happens. It is that one cannot delimit responsibility in advance without introducing an alibi. Wherever one draws a boundary, intention, role, circumstance, necessity, Sartre sees an attempt to offload responsibility onto something else. This offloading is what Sartre calls bad faith at the moral level. One continues to act, but refuses to own the meaning of action. One enjoys the benefits of agency while denying its costs. Sartre insists that this denial is ethically worse than failure. To act badly while acknowledging responsibility is, for him, more honest than to act competently while denying agency. This position shocks because it reverses common moral intuitions. Many moral systems prioritize outcome, success, or rule following. Sartre prioritizes ownership. Ownership does not mean pride, it means acknowledgement. To say, this was my choice and I accept its meaning even when that meaning is tragic. This acceptance becomes especially difficult under constraint. When options are narrow, dangerous, or imposed, the temptation to deny responsibility intensifies. Sartre insists that responsibility does not disappear under pressure, it becomes heavier. To say I had no choice usually means every choice was costly. Sartre agrees. But cost does not erase choice. It explains its difficulty. This insistence does not deny injustice. It denies innocence as refuge. Sartre's responsibility without limits therefore applies not only to action, but to inaction. Silence, withdrawal, neutrality, and refusal are all ways of taking up a situation. One cannot stand outside the world and observe it without implication. To remain silent is to allow something to continue. To withdraw is to accept the world as it is. These stances may be understandable. They are not neutral. This is why Sartre insists that responsibility multiplies in collective life. When action is shared, responsibility does not diffuse, it intensifies. Each participant is responsible for their part and for sustaining the whole. This claim is particularly uncomfortable in modern societies, where responsibility is often dispersed through institutions, procedures, and hierarchies. Sartre believes such dispersion functions primarily as moral camouflage. Institutions do not act, people act within them. This does not mean Sartre ignores systemic forces. He insists that systems shape possibilities. What he denies is that systems absolve. Responsibility without limits does not mean constant self-condemnation. Sartre does not advocate guilt as a virtue. He advocates lucidity. One must see what one is doing without consolation. This lucidity is what Sartre believes makes ethical life possible at all. Without it, morality becomes a performance rather than a commitment. By the end of this first part, the basic claim should be clear. Sartre's unlimited responsibility is not a demand to control the world. It is a demand to stop pretending that one's actions end where one wishes they did. Responsibility extends as far as freedom extends, and freedom, for Sartre, extends wherever one acts. But this raises a deeper problem. If responsibility has no natural limits, then how does one avoid paralysis, guilt, or despair? How does one live without being crushed by implication? And how does responsibility operate when others are equally free and equally responsible? Those questions cannot be avoided. They lead directly to the most difficult terrain in Sartre's thought, the relationship between responsibility, action, and justification. If responsibility truly has no natural limits, then a serious danger appears. One might expect Sartre's philosophy to collapse into paralysis, guilt, or despair. If every action implicates us beyond intention, if every silence counts, if every role fails to absolve, then how is action possible at all? Sartre does not deny this danger. He insists that it is real. Unlimited responsibility is heavy. It produces anxiety. It removes the comfort of innocence. But Sartre rejects the idea that this weight makes action impossible. On the contrary, he believes that refusing this weight is what leads to paralysis. Paralysis, for Sartre, arises not from responsibility, but from the desire for justification in advance. People want to know that what they are about to do is right before they do it. They want guarantees. They want reassurance that history, morality, or reason will vindicate them. Sartre denies that such reassurance is ever available. Action always precedes justification. This does not mean that justification is irrelevant. Sartre insists that justification is unavoidable, but it comes after action, not before. One acts, and only then must one answer for what one has done. This reversal is crucial. Moral systems promise justification first and action second. Sartre reverses the order. He insists that moral meaning emerges through action and must then be defended, explained, or borne. This is why Sartre speaks so often of anguish. Anguish is not fear of punishment. It is the awareness that one's action commits one without guarantee. To act is to expose oneself to judgment, by others and by oneself, without appeal. This exposure does not disappear once one has acted. Responsibility does not end with decision. It continues as one lives with consequences, reinterpretations, and the reactions of others. Sartre insists that one cannot escape this exposure without ceasing to act altogether. Withdrawal, silence, and neutrality may feel like refuge, but they are themselves stances that require ownership. This is why Sartre rejects the idea that responsibility can be distributed until it vanishes. In collective situations, responsibility becomes more complex, not less. Each person is responsible both for their own action and for sustaining the collective project they participate in. This claim becomes especially sharp when Sartre considers institutional life. Institutions encourage individuals to think of themselves as replaceable parts. Decisions appear to belong to systems rather than persons. Responsibility becomes abstract. Sartre sees this abstraction as dangerous. It allows people to act without seeing themselves as authors. Violence, harm, and injustice can then appear as functions rather than choices. Responsibility without limits cuts through this abstraction. It insists that no system acts on its own. Someone always decides how rules are applied, how orders are interpreted, and how far compliance goes. This does not mean Sartre believes resistance is always possible or safe. He insists only that obedience remains a choice, a costly, pressured, sometimes tragic choice, but a choice nonetheless. The refusal to acknowledge this choice is what Sartre finds ethically intolerable. At this point, Sartre's philosophy confronts a second danger: moral fanaticism. If justification comes only after action, what prevents individuals from committing atrocities and declaring them justified by commitment alone? Sartre does not offer a simple safeguard. He refuses the comfort of moral insurance. Instead, he insists that justification is never final. No action is immune from future judgment. One may justify oneself, but others may contest that justification. History may reinterpret it. One may come to reject it oneself. Responsibility, therefore, does not end with self-approval. It extends into ongoing vulnerability to critique. This openness is not weakness. It is the condition of moral seriousness. To act responsibly is to accept that one's action remains answerable, that it can be questioned, challenged, and condemned. Sartre believes fanaticism arises when individuals treat their justification as absolute. When one claims moral certainty, one closes oneself to responsibility. One stops listening. One turns commitment into dogma. Unlimited responsibility therefore requires fallibility. One must act without guarantee, but also without pretending to possess final truth. This balance is difficult. Sartre offers no method for achieving it. He insists only that refusing it leads to worse outcomes, either paralysis through the search for certainty or violence through the claim of certainty. This is why Sartre rejects moral innocence so forcefully. Innocence implies exemption from judgment. Sartre denies that anyone who acts can claim such exemption. One may be justified, one may be forgiven, one may be understood, but one is never simply innocent. This claim is not meant to crush the individual. It is meant to keep action honest. Honesty, for Sartre, does not mean purity. It means lucidity. To see what one is doing, to acknowledge its meaning, and to accept its consequences without alibi. This lucidity does not guarantee moral success. Sartre does not promise that responsible action will lead to good outcomes. He promises only that irresponsible action will always be dishonest, no matter how successful it appears. By the end of this analysis, Sartre's position should be clear. Responsibility without limits does not demand perfection, it demands ownership. It does not require control over the world, it requires refusal of excuse. It does not offer peace, it offers seriousness. This seriousness marks the point at which Sartre's philosophy begins to confront history directly. Once responsibility is understood as unlimited, questions of violence, revolution, and political commitment cannot be avoided. That confrontation lies ahead. For now, Sartre's demand stands in its starkest form. You act. Your action means something, and you are responsible for that meaning without refuge.